I found a sketch from an old sketchbook and I think I want to turn it into a painting. I have tons of sketches, doodles, thumbnails, and scribbles that I fill my sketchbooks with, and they're almost always based on photos that I collect for inspiration. And that's what I do. I get inspiration from other people's art. I get inspiration from cosplayers and costume designers and photography and paintings at a museum. Inspiration can come from anywhere. This sketch though, this doodle came from this photo. It's from a set of stock photos from an artist named Jessica Truscott, who goes by the name Facestock. I've used Jessica's wonderful references for over 15 years now. Back when I was teaching myself watercolors and learning about Art Nouveau, Jessica's free photo references on DeviantArt were everything for me. I use them all the time. So while most of the photos I've used in the past were free, Jessica's stock photos are for sale now too. And I purchased this fairy set because, well, it's amazing and also artists should support one another, right? As I was drawing the fairy, I didn't know what kind of wings I wanted them to have. So I asked an expert, my friend Nicole, otherwise known as Sound of the Forest. She's an expert on all things bugs. And Nicole suggested the wings of a Luna moth. And of course I loved that, so my fairy now has Luna moth wings. The problem is I hated the direction they were going in. So I'm gonna try them this way. Nope, I hate those too. Okay, what if they're wide open and it's going out this way now? Nope, that doesn't work either. For the record, I did this about 25 times. I just couldn't get it to look right. So I gave up and I decided I'm going to work on my fairy's costume because it made me feel better. So regarding the costume, if you remember, this is what the photo reference looked like. This is the costume that Jessica is wearing. And I like it, but I also really like the costumes that the fairies at our local Ren Fair wear. They look like this. I love the layers of clothes and the stripes and the polka dots and all of the little accessories, and I added that to my fairy. Oh, and I also gave them a purse. I made it look like a ladybug, which I thought was really kind of cute, a ladybug purse. It's all about the accessories, right? Okay, I'm gonna try one more time to get these wings right so I can move on. And this time I think I'm gonna add a little bit of tracing paper so I don't ruin the paper with all of the erasing. That's the plan anyways. It's supposed to work. Like doing all of this should help me, but it's not. I'm just not happy with these wings. And honestly, I think I'm just gonna give up on them for now and just start inking it. I'll just go where the dopamine takes me. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that we're doing this for fun. We're making art for us. So if you want to worry about the wings later, do it. If you really want to start inking, do it. There's no rules to this. Now, will I regret it later? Maybe. I'm essentially making it tomorrow Scott's problem, but he can handle it. I do this to him all the time. Another thing I'm noticing now is that my fairy's face is a bit more masculine than my reference photo. And you know what? I honestly like it. I spent a good portion of my youth trying to be a comic book artist, perfecting my rendition of the ultimate masculine and feminine figures for superheroes, and I enjoyed it. I really did. But as I got older, as I see the world in a less binary light, I sometimes want my characters to be a bit more androgynous. I want the viewer to have the option to determine their backstory, their identity, their gender. Not all the time, but sometimes I think it's a good exercise for me and for anyone looking at my work. This was purely accidental, but I like it, and I will continue to refer to this fairy as they or them and let you decide who they are in a way that makes you happy. And speaking of their identity, I've been calling them a fairy, and I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a fairy and a fae, spelled F-A-E. I am no expert. I'm the furthest thing from being an expert on fairies and fae. I like the aesthetic of fairies from books and movies and have always been drawn, no pun intended, to fairies and elves and the like. My limited understanding, and this is completely rudimentary, is that fae are more tricksters. They're more, not evil, but a little more mischievous. And fairy are a little kinder. From what I've read, fae are similar to pixies and fairies are similar to elves. And I think somewhere along the lines, maybe around the time of J.R.R. Tolkien's writing, fairies kind of became elves. So that's what little I know. I'm sure there are some really good experts, and I've done what little research I could, but there's so many people with so many differing opinions, and I'm not in a place to argue one way or another, just letting you know this is why I'm calling them a fairy, because from my understanding, fae are a little bit more mischievous. Now, this fairy's face could indicate some mischievousness, so maybe they are a fae. I don't know. Please let me know. Am I painting a fae or a fairy? Finally, it's time to draw the ladybug purse. First, I'm gonna get these straps and then the actual purse. And I'm totally doing this out of my head. I'm just making it up as I go, which I don't usually do. Usually I have some sort of reference, but I think I know what a ladybug would look like. And I'm not making it look like a ladybug, I'm making it look like a ladybug purse. And you'll notice that a lot of times I'll add a second line, and that's to give it thickness. I found that adding a second line will just give it depth that usually line work doesn't have. And now I get to add in the dots, which is kind of the fun part. I think it's there's little things that you can do when you're drawing that always just seem like fun, and drawing in ladybug dots is really fun, and I should do it more often because I need more fun in my life. Okay, now back to the material. I'm adding in some folds, but really what I want to talk about is texture. If you look on the photo reference, there's a pattern. It's like a see-through kind of pattern texture on this cloth here. And so I'm adding just these little scribbles. I'm not trying to match what's on the photo reference. I'm just adding little scribbles, but I'm using a finer point pen so that way it doesn't all feel like it's at the same level. And what that's doing, just like I'm adding polka dots to the leggings, what that's doing is that's giving us different materials. It's giving us different textures for different parts. So everything isn't uniform and kind of blank. Adding texture to your inking really makes a difference because you're going to do it also with the paint, but I like adding it with the inking too. And now this is another thing I'm doing is I'm adding transparent texture. So essentially we're seeing through this material, and I'm using a fine tip pen so that way you can see how this texture, this material is see-through. I'm giving that indication by adding a softer line underneath it. See how the polka dot patterns are lighter than the ones on the other leg, which aren't being covered by a half see-through material. And if you look when the half see-through material, when that sheer material is folded in on top of itself, it becomes a little more opaque. So in those spots, I'm actually doing even lighter lines. I'm not filling in the polka dots. And that's how you indicate transparency or semi-transparency with inking. Okay, I've put it off long enough and I have to do the wings. So I got out the tracing paper and I tried again and again and again. And I did it so many times that I actually had to time lapse it for you because otherwise it would take another 30 minutes. So this is about 30 minutes sped up. I tried every possibility I could think of, but I learned from my mistake and I didn't just pencil on the paper and erase it a bunch of times. This time I just went through pretty much an entire pad of tracing paper. You can see them piling up in the top left, but I just kept trying different ideas. What if it was a different type of wing? What if it was dragonfly wings or any other type of wings? Well, I eventually came up with 5 different possibilities, and I sent them to my friends Charlotte and Nicole, and I asked them to pick their favorites. And the winner was number 5. So here we go. Let's start inking. Once you start inking, there's no going back. So it's number 5, 100%. Not going back. And my fellow artists, we got to do this every once in a while. We have to just make a decision and go for it, because otherwise you just get stuck worrying about what the right decision is. And there is no right decision. There's just, you're making art. You're not saving a life, okay? Just pick something and go for it. And I do see the irony in the fact that I did probably 50 different variations until I picked this one. But my point is yes, take your time to make the best decision you can. But at some point, you got to make a decision and go for it. Don't let fear and indecision stop you from doing the thing that you love. Okay, so now that I'm done with the wings and the little tail things here, it's time to start working on the background. So I got out my camera, I went out front, and I got down really low and took some pictures of the grass and moss and things outside my house, outside the Hobbit hole. And I thought it was so cool looking at the world from this really, really low angle. And I had no idea that moss looked like this up close. Look at that, it looks like a carpet, doesn't it? So with an abundance of photos of mushrooms and moss and leaves and acorns, I started drawing the background. And I love the fact that the background in this fairy scene is basically my front yard. I love the fact that these are little things that go unnoticed when I walk outside. You never go and get down to the ground and look at this stuff from that very low point of view. It's really interesting to me. It's like an unseen world. Okay, so for the next several days, I worked on the background. I worked on this moss and grass and leaf and acorn covered environment. And the first bits of moss, I just don't think came out very well because I was really kind of finding my way around it, how to render this twisty, carpety looking kind of wormy moss. And I think I was getting frustrated by it, so I decided to noodle the wings a little bit more. I decided I wanted to give it a little bit of transparency so that way you see what was behind that fold right there. And I like it. I like doing stuff like this. Also, it's nice to get distracted and do something while your brain figures out stuff like moss. Okay, back to the moss. I think I figured it out. I've kind of worked out in my head how I'm going to render it. Basically a bunch of little worms that are kind of interlocking over each other. And as you kind of do this, as you're just listening to music and vibing, it kind of almost becomes automatic and your hand just starts doing it and you can kind of daydream while you're making moss. And you know what? I don't even think I determined if that is moss. I have no idea what these plants are. I don't know if they're poisonous or if they're moss or whatever, but these are the things in front of my house, and I enjoyed drawing them. If you know what they are, please leave me a comment about it. I know for sure that this is an acorn. Okay, I know that, and it was really fun to draw. Okay, now that this is done, and I've been using my 0.005 micron pen, I'm gonna make the outline around the fairy a little bit thicker to make sure that they pop, make sure that they feel like they're in front of the background. Now this is a little bit of a stylistic choice. I do like the designy aspect of having a thick outline. That's always been something I've liked in my art. But it's also a bit of a storytelling device where your eye goes to thicker lines and stronger contrast naturally, and thinner lines and less contrast get pushed into the background. To illustrate that a little bit better, I'm going to break out my 0.003 micron pen. I don't know if you could see the difference, but the 0.003 is on the right and the 0.005 is on the left. It's really small. Here's the zebra brush pen, and here's the 005, and this is the 003. Look how tiny that is. So I very rarely use a 003 because it's so thin, but I use it to show something is really far back in the distance. So my normal inking is done with the zebra pen, which is like the fairy here. And then the 005 I used for the background. And now I'm going to use the 003 for the way background. And the thin lines will give it a feeling of distance, like as if there's atmosphere in between us and these trees in the background. That's the hope, at least. Oh, and if you're wondering where I get the reference for my trees, it's right outside the Hobbit hole. See the ivy growing up the trees? That's what I'm looking at. I just look up from my desk and I'm looking out the window, and that's my neighbor's yard. Hi, neighbor. But this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be looking at nature. We're supposed to be going out and observing and getting our inspiration from everything, whether it's cosplayers or the acorns and moss outside your front door or your neighbor's trees outside your Hobbit hole window. Everything we see, everything we observe, every book we read, every movie we watch, every music we listen to can be our inspiration. It's supposed to be our inspiration. So go outside, go get down into the grass and take some pictures. Go sketch your neighbor's trees or your own trees if you have trees. Use these mundane things to create magical things. Use the world outside to create something that doesn't exist otherwise. That's what we're supposed to do as artists. We're supposed to see the world a little bit differently than everybody else and put that into pictures or words or music. And that's, I hope, how we make the world a little bit better, a little bit more magical. Because we need more magic in the world. We need to see something hopeful. We need to see something bigger than us in the world. And I think it's the artist's job to show that, to create that. Okay, I just want to point out, do you see this paper towel? You might be wondering why I'm using that. It's because your hand has oils on it. My hand rests on the paper. And the oil from your hand can actually stop the watercolors from touching the paper. So I rest my hand on this paper towel. That brings me to another point. A lot of you have problem with your hands shaking, and especially when you're inking, you're worried that your hands are going to shake. And resting your hand on the paper is the best way to keep your hand from shaking. That's how I get my lines to be so... My lines aren't very smooth, but not shaky. So if your hands are shaky, try resting it on the paper. But put down a paper towel first because you don't want the oils from your hand to ruin your piece. And now I'm just going to speed this part up because this is just me listening to Duran Duran or Def Leppard on my record player and zoning out while I make trees. And now I'm finally at the mushroom in the back. And it was really part of the original design was to have a giant mushroom, and the mushroom's just normal sized mushroom, I'm sure, and the fairy is just very small, but it was important to have this mushroom in the composition. So because it was just a sketch and the mushroom was something out of my imagination, I had no idea what the underneath of a mushroom looked like. So I looked up a bunch of photos and I found one that was similar to what I had drawn. And am I weird in kind of equating the texture underneath the mushroom to hair? For some reason, it kind of reminds me of the way that I like to draw hair. It's a very satisfying texture. I don't know any other way to say it, but it is very fun to draw. And now is this the stalk? Is that what you would call this part of the mushroom? Well, the long part of the mushroom. I started doing this texture just to kind of give it some texture. I was looking at, you could see the picture here. It's kind of like bumpy. It's just some sort of little texture, not like a tree branch or anything, but it has its own texture. And I was going basically from top to bottom. I was going in a straight line. And at some point I realized this is really boring and I should not do this anymore. Anytime you can make something a little more interesting, you should. And straight up and down just is not that interesting. And wrapping around an object is so much more interesting visually. So despite already having started in a vertical fashion, I decided to start inking over it with more of a wrapping around kind of texture. And I know I'm going to have to deal with it later, but I knew that this was probably something I should have worked out before. And of course I got tired of that, so I went with my pencil and started to add some more plants in front of the mushroom to give it a little bit more depth. And here's where I start shooting myself in the foot. Again, I still wasn't happy with this stalk. It feels like just too big of a space, and despite trying to wrap the texture around, I'm not happy with it. So I had an idea. And it might be a crazy idea, but what if I had a millipede going around this mushroom stalk? I don't know anything about millipedes. I don't even know if it's a centipede or a millipede. I will look it up. But I do know that it needed something a little bit more. It needed to not look so blank. That just was really bothering me, the blankness. So I did this little drawing on tracing paper. I took a picture of it and I sent it to my friends Nicole and Charlotte and said, do you think I should put a centipede on the mushroom? And they both responded with a resounding yes. So I found some pictures of some millipedes. It turns out that millipedes have more legs. I guess centa means like 100 and milla means like a million. I don't know. But apparently milla is more than centa. And so I got pictures of a millipede and I'm going to show pictures of them. So if you do not like bugs or millipedes, just close your eyes for a second because I'm going to be posting a picture right now. So this is what millipedes look like apparently, and I use these photos to make my drawing. Okay, you can open your eyes now. So now that I had my photo reference, I did my pencils and started inking right over the previous inking for the stalk of the mushroom. And the reason why I did that is because it's easier for me to just ink what I needed and then cover up the old lines that I don't need. It's not the best way of doing stuff, but it works for me, and obviously a little bit more planning would be better, but it's not uncommon for artists to get inspiration after the fact, after they've already done something. And when you do get inspiration in the middle of a piece, the fact that you have to redo something shouldn't stop you from making your piece better. So I've tried this before. This is Daniel Smith watercolor ground, and it's okay. I tried it with the Dragon and Centaur piece, and it's goopy and it's not completely opaque, but I think it'll be good enough for what I need now. The one thing is I like that it has a little bit of a watercolor paper texture to it. I think the best solution would have been to paint over it with white acrylic gouache and then go over it with the watercolor grounds. But I'm lazy and I'm so far into this that I don't want to spend the extra time. So I'll just make this tomorrow Scott's problem and let him deal with it. And now it's just a matter of finishing up the piece, just getting these last little bits of plants done and rounding out this little world that the fairy is going to occupy. And using the photos that I took from outside my front door, I'm adding all the little bits and pieces that you might find in a mossy area, like bits of tree branches and sticks and dried up leaves and all sorts of stuff, which is kind of fun to do. And then the moss, so much moss. So this took me several days of just listening to records and kind of tuning out and noodling. And I know it shouldn't be fun, but it kind of is. It's just very relaxing. It's very almost meditative. And while I was doing it, I had what I think was a pretty cool idea. I thought I would do my signature in the moss. If you remember, for the Gothic vampire, I had my name on the jar with eyeballs in it. And I always thought that was kind of cool to kind of sneak your name in somewhere where it's just not just a signature in the bottom corner. So this time around, I thought it would be really fun to kind of incorporate my signature in the moss. And not for any other reason other than I thought it would be fun. And that's why we make art, right? Because we thought it would be fun. And then we find out otherwise. No, art should be fun. It's not always fun, but it should be fun, because why else would we do it? And now it's time to use the 003 micron. If you remember, the finer lines are for the stuff in the background. It's to kind of give the piece a sense of depth. And the nice thing about this is I can add all of the details that I want to, and it's not going to distract from the main subject. So I can add hundreds of trees back there and all of the texture, the wood bark on the trees. I can add a broken one like this one right here, or some that have fallen. And I'm so close. I could see the end right there. Just a few more trees and this will be done. I'm so excited. I've been working on this piece for a couple of weeks, and it's been really nice to just have something I can kind of noodle whenever I want to here in the Hobbit hole. I did it. Oh, no, wait, no. I still want to add a little bit of texture to the millipede. Let's add some little dots on his butt, little millipede butt, and add some dots to the millipede torso, I guess. and some dots to the millipede forehead. Little circles and dots. And now I'm done. And now it's time to take the piece and scan it. Because it's bigger than my scanner, I will have to scan it in separate parts and then stitch it together. And this is it, all put together. The inks are done. And guess what? Now it's time to color it in. But I'm not doing this by myself. No sirree, Bob. I'm doing this with you. If you go to my site, you go to resources, go to free downloads, and then go over to free coloring pages, and you click on that, and then go to miscellaneous, click on that. There is a scan of the Luna Fairy. I just decided to call them a Luna Fairy because of the Luna Moth wings. You can download the inks for free, and also there's a bunch more of my art that I scanned in for you to download for free as well. We did it! We finished inking the fairy, and I think adding color is going to be so fun. Please feel free to download them and color them in yourselves, and tag me if you post it online. I'd love to see what wonderful colors you use to bring the Luna Fairy to life.